The term Schwerer Panzerspähwagen covers the 6- and 8-wheeled armored cars Germany used during the Second World War. In the German army, armored cars were intended for the traditional cavalry missions of reconnaissance and screening. They scouted ahead and to the flank of advancing mechanized units to assess enemy location, strength and intention. The primary role was reconnaissance, but they would engage similar light units and at times attempt to capture enemy patrols. History. The heavy Panzerspähwagen was a large but very fast and highly versatile addition to the German army. The original 6-rad versions were based on a 6x4 truck with an armored body, but by 1937 they were being replaced by the 8-rad versions. During the replacement, the SD, KFZ numbers were carried directly over. Differentiation is made by the addition of 6-rad or 8-rad in the vehicle's name. These vehicles were used throughout the war in various guises and first saw combat in the campaign against Poland and in the Battle of France. Later, they saw use in both the USSR and North Africa. Extreme climatic conditions in both these areas proved too severe for the vehicle. In the USSR, adverse ground conditions immobilized 150 SD. KFZ-232s during the first wet season of the campaign. The speed of the 8-wheeled cars made them the best scouting vehicles that Rommel had for long-range reconnaissance across the wide desert territory. Armor. The SD, KFZ-232 had 15 mm of slightly sloped homogeneous steel armor on the front, 8 mm on the sides, and 10 mm on the back, with 6 mm and 5 mm of armor on the top and bottom respectively. This armor was designed to provide protection from small arms fire and key fragments. It was ineffective against heavier weapons. After the French campaign, additional spaced frontal armor plate was added to provide better protection. Armor was increased up to 30 mm in the later SD KFZ-234 series. However, it was not designed to provide protection from anti-tank weapons. Armament. The SD, KFZ-232 was armed with a 20 mm KWK-30L-55 autocannon. This cannon was based on the 20 mm Flak 30 anti-aircraft gun, and was capable of firing at a rate of 280 rounds per minute. The 20 mm cannon was not designed to defeat enemy tanks. Experiments were made towards replacing it with a heavier gun, which resulted in the SDKFZ-234 Puma. The Puma's 50 mm gun could penetrate and knock out Allied armored cars and light tanks, but this was not the vehicle's role. The role intended was for the car's armor to protect the crew from small arms fire during reconnaissance missions. Using high explosive ammunition, the 20 mm autocannon was highly effective against infantry and unarmored vehicles. Great success was also achieved by replacing the regular armor-piercing explosive ammunition with an early version of APDS, but this ammunition was in chronically short supply. Power plant. Production versions of the SDKFZ-232 were fitted with a 155 horsepower, 8-cylinder Bussing-Nag L8 VG petrol engine, which gave a top speed of 85 km/h and a range of 300 km. Crew. A crew of 4 was typical. The commander and gunner sat in the turret. The SDKFZ-232 employed an unusual dual-driver arrangement, with one driver seated at each end of the vehicle. This allowed the vehicle to be driven in either direction with equal ease. 6-wheelers. All 6 RAD versions were produced from 1932 to 1937. SD, KFZ 231, the first of the German armored cars. The SD, KFZ 231 was based on a modified 6x4 truck chassis of brands Daimler-Benz, Bussing and Magirus. The 231 was armed with a 2 cm KWK-30L 55 autocannon and a machine-aimer 13 machine gun. It had a second reverse position in the rear so that the vehicle could be driven either forwards or backwards with relative ease. The 231 was introduced into service in 1932 and began to be replaced in 1937 when the German Army switched production to 8-wheeled armored cars, instead of 6-wheel. Despite being replaced, they were used by Aufklärungsunits during the invasion of Poland, the Battle of France, and the invasion of the USSR. They were withdrawn afterwards for use in internal security and training. A crew consisted of a commander, gunner, driver, and a radio operator, rear driver. SD, KFZ 232 to 232 carried a Fu, G11 Shay 100 medium range on a Fu, SPR, G a short-range radio. This model was very distinctive because of the heavy, bed-spring antenna over most of the hull. This antenna was supported by 2 insulated vertical connecting tubes at the back corners and an inverted U-shaped tube construction on the turret sides with a central joint that allowed the turret its full 360 degrees traverse. SD, KFZ. This was a radio vehicle, Panzerspähwagen, equipped with extra long-range radio equipment and an additional radio operator. To support the additional equipment, the turret was omitted, the superstructure was raised and only a single ball-mounted machine gun was mounted. 8-wheelers. SD, KFZ 231 family. As the cross-country performance of the 6-wheeled armored cars was deemed insufficient, the Heer Ordnance Department signed a contract with Bussing to develop an 8-wheel armored car with all-wheel drive, all-wheel steering and 2 driver positions at front and rear. Deutsche Worker in Kiel were contracted to design the armored body. The armored body looked somewhat similar to the 6-wheel predecessors. The turret in the 231-232 series was altered to a hexagonal shape for increased internal volume. It was equipped with a 2 cm KWK-30L 55 autocannon and a coaxial 7.92 mm MG34 machine gun. The SD, KFZ 231, 232 and 263 were initially built on chassis slightly modified for the needs. From July 1942 they were built on the same Einheitsfahrgestell chassis and had their armor increased to 30 mm. From September 1941, a more powerful engine was installed, providing 180 PS instead of 155 PS. From late 1940, standoff angled armor plates were mounted about 50 cm in front of the vehicles. This additional armor was retrofitted to older vehicles and dropped with introduction of the strengthened front armor in July 1942. SD, KFZ 231. This was the standard reconnaissance variant built from 1937 to 1941. From July 1941, any need for a 231 was fulfilled by producing a 232 without the additional radio equipment. The official name was Schwerer Panzerspähwagen SD, KFZ 231, SD, KFZ 232. The SD, KFZ 232, which was produced from 1938 to 1943, was a 231 with additional medium-range radio sets and a large frame aerial. From 1942, a small stern antenna replaced the frame aerial, a modification retrofitted to older models. The official name was Schwerer Panzerspähwagen SD, KFZ 232, SD, KFZ 233. This was equipped with a short-barreled 7.5 cm KWK-37L 24 gun and based on the open-topped superstructure of the SD, KFZ 263 radio vehicle. 109 of these vehicles were built at the Bassing-Nag plant between December 1942 and October 1943. A further 10 were converted from 263 chassis in October 1942. This variant of the SD, KFZ series entered service during 1942 and remained in use throughout the war. They were issued as a platoon of 6 vehicles in support of reconnaissance battalions. The official name was Schwerer Panzerspähwagen SD, KFZ 233. SD, KFZ 263. This was an 8-wheeler with an open-topped fixed superstructure armed with a single 7.92 mm machine-Their 34 machine gun. It was a dedicated radio vehicle with the bedstead frame aerial. The official name was Panzerfunkwagen SD, KFZ 263, SD, KFZ 234 family. The SD, KFZ 234 series were completely new designs, of a similar size and appearance to the SD, KFZ 231 family that they replaced. They were powered by a Tatra diesel. The most obvious external difference is the single-piece mudguards compared to the two-piece mudguards on the 232 series. SD, KFZ 234/1. The SD, KFZ 234/1 was fitted with a 2 cm KWK-38L 55 gun and coaxial 7.92 mm machine-Their 34 or MG42 machine gun in a rotating 6-sided open-topped turret. The open top was protected from grenades by a mesh-covered frame. The second version to enter production, built from July 1944 to the end of war, SD, KFZ 234 halves. This version had a turret adapted from the cancelled VK1602 Leopard, mounting of 5 cm KWK-39/1L 60, very similar to the weapon previously used on the later versions of the Panzerkampfwagen III. It weighed nearly 12 tons but was still capable of 85 km/h. It was one of the most heavily armored cars available. However, engagement was strictly discouraged due to its thin armor, and also due to its intended role of reconnaissance. The armored car could be driven backwards by the radio operator in an emergency. Series production started in December 1943 and ended in July 1944, with production switching to 234/1 and 234/3. Many publications use the name Puma for this vehicle, but this was neither officially used nor was it a nickname. SD, KFZ 234/3. This version, like the SD, KFZ 233, carried the short 7.5 cm K51L 24 gun in a raised open superstructure. The gun's low velocity made its armor-piercing round ineffective against most Allied tanks, but allowed the high explosive shell casing to be thinner and thus contain more explosive. The heat round for this weapon was, however, effective against vehicles. In December 1944, production ended in favor of the 234 quarters. SD, KFZ 234 quarters, another variant of the 8-wheeler, but mounting a 7.5 cm PaK 40L 46 anti-tank gun in an open compartment. This variant was similar to the Marder tank destroyer series in that it was a weakly armored, open-topped anti-tank vehicle that could not engage enemy armor head-to-head. It was a stopgap measure.